and the like on the project that's going on at Rutgers University Law Library in Camden. But before I go into our project, can I just see by a show of hands, how many people are involved in the audience in digital projects now at go to law school? Okay, so, could you, I just, by way of sample, what type of projects are you working on now? Yeah.
Along with the LI, so we always have something.
Okay.
Right now, there's any number of things out there, and I think
okay. Anyone else would like to share with the group on what they're working on? Or? Deb? In the hot for them. On our end, what we're working on are government documents. We've actually started to work on a project of scanning government documents 5 years or older. We've had negotiations with the GPO on materials, and my discussion will be on the project that we're working on with the government documents. Basically, the points that I wanted to cover were a brief synopsis of the project history, the equipment that we've selected, selection and preparation of the materials themselves, labor costs, and we're doing it in-house, and we've tried to keep costs to a minimum. Assembling our digital conversion team, quality control issues. I'll give a brief conclusion. I've included a selected bibliography on resources for people if you're interested in getting up to speed on this. And depending on your knowledge base, there are different materials in the bibliography for you, both electronic and print resources. So those are the areas I like to cover. And really, we started rolling, to my knowledge anyway, in about 2004. It was the insight of my colleague who decided to actively go out and look at both digital equipment and also to get up to speed on the technological issues that were involved in the project. And some of the things that we did during that period were to select scanning equipment, actually research the equipment and purchase the equipment. And the place where we found most helpful was the AIM conference, which is actually, was that in Philadelphia?
No, it was in New York City last year. It's Philadelphia this year.
Okay. And we actually went together in Philadelphia this year. But that was where we selected our scanner, which was, ultimately we decided on a Panasonic scanner. Basically, we were looking for something that was user-friendly, efficient, and reasonably priced. And the price on this one was about $999, the educational price on it. So that and was the path that we went down for purchasing the items. On actually selecting the material, there was some collaboration involved on what we were going to do with our government documents person. There were some issues with deaccessioning of government document materials from our collection in order to allow us to scan those resources. And I'll get to that a little bit further. We also expanded our scanning space. We initially had a real basic area, but we've now included, we have 2 scanners, a flatbed and a duplex scanner, which was purchased, which is a Panasonic. We have a microfiche scanner, which we've also purchased, and we have a designated area in our reserves where our reserve resources are located, where those materials are utilized. And at that point, as I said, one librarian was primarily responsible for the project. I became involved in 2005 on the project, so we have a tandem management team going. I do more of the logistics and the administrative things with the faculty and staff, and trying to get our team together, and John does more of the technical issues. So Again, our management in 2005 expanded to 2 librarians. On our end, what we tried to do with an in-house project was there are a number of options. You could outsource, you could hire additional staff. What we've been doing is taking people from various departments within the library. They've been working approximately 2 hours per week. So we've been able to, during the spring semester, assemble about a 24-hour schedule with staff members from different departments together with some student workers, although that varies. And through that period, we've been able to assemble a staff of people. And in the summertime, our hours are down and our production goes down a little bit. But that's where the project is right now. We've also implemented quality control, metadata interface, and other technical issues have been addressed. The scanner that we purchased, the scanner that we purchased, again, was the Panasonic. For some reason, it's not coming up. But in any event, if you go to the Panasonic site, they have a variety of. We've had very good luck with the Panasonic machine. And the page has a number of both base level units together with your industrial strength type machines. For our purposes, getting off the ground, the base level machine was more appropriate. And that's it right now. And it'll give you that's a duplex scanner, and that was important for this project because we're doing government documents, which are both 2 sides of the page. What we have to do in prepping the materials is we have to cut them. It's a page feeder duplex scanner that you have to cut the pages, feed them in. Basically we put about 80 pages in, and the people are able to leave. I mean, there are some initial quality control issues that I'll get into, but for the money we've had pretty good luck with the scanner. So, but that's it. It's compact, I believe under 20 pounds, quite efficient and reasonably priced. So. Again, reasonably priced, compact, efficient, the duplex scanning feature. The continuous paper feed is probably the best thing for us. Rather than having our staff persons continually remain at the machine, it allows them to multitask at the same time. So that was quite important. And an imaging viewer software was included, the RTIB software, which we've found to be quite helpful. It allows multiple page viewing and has a number of options that are included, automatic deskewing, and the like. So the one drawback that perhaps we found, despite the fact that it is relatively contained, I mean, we've found that the dust accumulation in the machine is actually required frequent cleaning, and it can slow us up a little bit. So, and you can use the air, and there's some rubbing alcohol type products that are out there that we've used to ultimately clean it. But we've seen lines coming up on the pages, and that really takes time with our unit. Yes?
Can you characterize frequent?
I would say, I mean, there were times where, it was happening, on a weekly basis, within a few weeks, and then we determined how to clean the machine with the air gun together with some of the cleaner. Once we got the knack of things, it seems to be okay now. There's actually a prompt that comes up, too, with this machine that says the rollers need to be cleaned, but it's more than just the rollers. You have to clean with where the scanning heads are, and get in there with the air gun. That seems to help as well. So, but that really, was one of the stumbling blocks, I think, on the project. We've done about 9,000 total pages this spring, or more actually. But now, we're in the second phase of quality control. But that problem probably held us up a little bit. And this is the computer size that's recommended for projects such as ours. You may have larger machines and larger capacity, but I think particularly important, and maybe John can attest to this because he does a lot of viewing on the screen. But the size of the monitor, we have 2 monitors of rather large size in the back, and that's for quality control and so. We basically have 2 workstations in that particular area. So, okay. And again, the software that was included was the RTIV Reliable Throughput Imaging Viewer, which allows multiple page viewing. It has an automatic deskew feature. This is 2 other important factors. The images can be saved into multiple image files, and PDFs, BMP, JPEGs, and TIFF files are all available. And another alternative that we have is it's loaded into it's your fan viewer. This is one of your more popular graphic viewers, from my understanding anyway, and we've used it on occasion, but I think the RTIV is quite popular. And also the Windows has a picture and fax viewer built in, which some of our people have used the thumbnail feature, which has also been helpful in reviewing documents. Yes?
Can you describe in general the text government documents you decided to scan?
We are working on hearings right now that are 5 years or older. Really, I guess an underlying issue of the whole project was that we're in the process of a new building project, and we have, and we also have other space issues in the library, and ultimately we made a decision on a particular part of the collection to scan. The government documents were selected depositories, so we have a certain number that are contained with the law journals on the 4th floor of our library. We actually have the 3rd, 4th, and 5th floor. But the materials are hearings, they're 5 years or older, and actually there was some dialogue between our government documents librarian, John Joergensen, and GPO Access on making, on policy issues, what we can, what we can scan, when you can discard materials, and the like. We actually, and I'll get into this, but we have a temporary catalog of documents. We have a storage area where we keep them right now. So, but as far as the materials themselves, that's really what we're focusing on. Hearings, 5 years or older at this point, which are, they're double-sided, and there's some preparation issues that are, implemented as well. Yeah.
How do you manage collaboration and sharing to make sure that there aren't several libraries that are participating in the same sense of information?
As far as, I think as far as government documents is concerned, have you been able to take that? Go ahead. I'll defer to my colleague on that one.
Well, number one, as far as we know, nobody's doing this yet with congressional documents or anything else. GPO is working on standards right now to have an archiving program, but they haven't moved very far forward with it, to my knowledge. The last time I talked to them, they were still debating metadata standards and actually imaging standards as well. In addition to that, even if other places are also doing this, that's a good thing. So if there's overlap on this stuff, that just means there are more copies being saved. And why not?
I guess my answer to that would be, it would be better if somebody else does scan something.
Yes, that's true.
So to your knowledge, there isn't really any effort to coordinate.
No, not yet. One of the reasons, of course, why we're here in front of you today is to start talking about what we're doing and maybe get something like that rolling.
Again, government documents have been selected. The temporary cataloging issues, I've met with our catalog, our technical services person, to ensure that, I was just concerned that we would have an instance where somebody would be looking for these documents while they were being processed, and albeit a faculty member or somebody else, and we wouldn't be able to locate a hard copy of the resource. So we've actually created in our online records a place where it said, it's scan 310B, which is the location of these materials, so people will know where to go to get these resources during this period where they're being transitioned from the print to the digital context, and ultimately a determination is made when we can discard the material. So that's basically on the temporary cataloging issues, things that we had to consider when we were working on the project. But as far as preparation of the materials, we have trained our staff to basically unbind the materials are unbound, then they're cut, then they're placed in an area where they're to be scanned, and we have a production team that does, although they multitask, some people are assigned document preparation while others are actually placed on the scanning team and others are doing quality control as well. So that's kind of the way we've set it up, at least initially as we've started to get rolling. I've included some prices. Actually, these are courtesy of John, and we were actually working on another project with law journals as well, similar thoughts, and certainly consortium working with other libraries was also a point on that. So, and he may address that as well. But these are some of his numbers that he worked out on the law journals, which as far as pages, they were double-sided and relatively similar size to the documents we're working on. So, basically on the unbinding and page preparation at 15 minutes per 800-page volume, 3,200 pages an hour, we use $12 per hour. So it would be $0.004 per page on the unbinding and page preparation. Assembly and article and entering of metadata for items is a little bit higher in price. And then the scanning rate, we've actually been able to keep relatively low as well. John and I have gone to a couple of conferences where they've discussed outsourcing and the rates on doing some of these projects. I mean, we really are confident that we're saving a significant amount of funds by doing it in-house. I mean, some of the numbers that they were talking about on the total production were, $20 plus per image, correct? I mean, so we're trying to cut it down when we believe we have.
20 to 50 cents per page, easy.
Yeah, well, but I was saying per job, correct? Yeah. So that's a big difference for us. Yes.
Do you have some kind of special funding like grants?
Yeah, I was going to get to that. We've made initial efforts to reach out to other places within Rutgers to form initial discussions on trying to work together on these projects. Nothing formally has formed yet. And John and I have started to look into grant writing. We actually haven't written a formal grant on anything to date. We've funded things on our own, through our own budget so far. That's why we've tried to keep the costs to a minimum, and both on the production end and the equipment end as well. So I think we've succeeded in doing that. So go ahead. And these are some of the other factors involved on the labor costs for in-house. Quality review of the images, just for clarity, corrections, and that takes some time as well, rescanning errors. And we have one person in particular who's just in charge of doing the rescanning at this point. So we've kind of taken a delegation of tasks and box things out, and there's one person who's just doing the rescanning. There's actually a log that's filled out by the other scanners who do the initial control, look for some problems, and then this person will take the materials and appropriately include them and rescan them. So, and then the grants issue, and a digital consortium as well, working with other schools as well to try to accomplish some larger goals was also something that we were interested in. So, and as far as assembling the team, we have one person, two managers really, one handling technical issues, one handling more of the staff-related issues. Staff participants come from various departments. They're multitasking. Average about 2 hours per week. And an alternative, if you have the funds, is to hire additional digitization staff. So, and staff workers vary depending on the time of the year. So, and our training has included technology workshops, conferences, which shows to get up to the speed on this. The AIM conference, listservs and things along that nature have also been helpful. And we have training for our staff as well. Training includes scanner and software use, document preparation, along with proper implementation of quality control. The students also receive scanning and training equipment as well. And I thought it was important for as time progresses to do a training manual for people as they, because we have some, I wouldn't say a revolving door, but we have change depending from semester to semester. So I think, you could do a training manual on the steps for our project and provide that in addition to the training session. I think it's helpful to do that.
When you use students, do you have them scanning, say on weekends at the circulation desk, or they have the scanning area where that's the only thing they're doing?
Well, the nice thing about that batch control and the ability to put multiple pages in is that you can actually leave the area and do other things. So they can, at least on the initial scan, they can put the materials in and do other, and come back and check it routinely, say every 10 minutes or so, to make sure that things are, and reinsert additional pages. But that, more on the quality control end, as far as the second stage, their students are really not involved on that to date, but perhaps in the future they might be. But they can do a variety of different things at the same time, based on the quality of that machine, too.
One of the things we found with the initial scanning, you can sit there and do quality control as the scans go through. But the machine is fairly fast, fast in terms of scanning batches of stuff. The paper goes through nice and quick, and then the images pop up. But sitting there with 120 sheets that you keep on reloading is just so incredibly mind-crushing and boring that you can't rely on someone to do effective quality control at that stage. So we don't really bother at that point. We keep the scanner full. If something obviously goes wrong, like a paper misfeed, the machine stops. But a minor misfeed is going to be caught later on. And there's just no guarantee that they'll catch it in the first place anyway, because they're going to end up reading a book or sleeping.
Suppose you had a hearing that, let's say, has a big pull down tab.
Yeah.
You got to handle that.
Yeah, we haven't put those through to date.
We're not doing it yet. We do have a flatbed that we can use for that, and we would just have to handle it specially.
And there will be some quirks like that. As we go, we're trying to learn as you go. Yeah.
Presumably, there are no handling costs associated with fragility or anything else that you're going to buy.
Yeah.
Would you speculate about what would happen to your costs if you were doing preservation of stuff that was flaky?
They would escalate dramatically. One of the issues, in fact, I was going to talk about a little bit later, is one of the reasons why we're not waiting for the GPO to really cooperate more with them is, number one, and this is kind of related, is that the standards that they're stating right now are very high. They want 600 dot per inch. They want 24-bit grayscale images, completely uncompressed TIFFs. So we're talking, and one image per page. So we're talking huge files for each page. And if you're scanning and preserving something that's very delicate, something that's worth preserving for its own sake as an object, well, then that's perfectly appropriate. But the kind of material that we're scanning here, and one of the reasons why we selected it, is because it's made on fairly cheap paper with pretty cheap ink. The information on the pages is very important, but a congressional hearing as an object is not worth much. So we chop it up, scan it, and throw it away. But if it was something delicate that we really needed to treat carefully, it could not go through a sheet fed scanner. And somebody would have to sit there for however long it took and do each individual page. So that makes a huge difference.
Presumably because your light on bytes, long-term storage and up conversion costs and stuff like that are not a worry yet. Or
No. Again, another point I was going to make later on. But actually, can I hold off on that?
I just want to ask quickly, are you going to talk at some point about why you chose what you chose that you are scanning? Because this could easily be the project that at the library. And, you either have space needs or something else that was the impetus for starting this in the first place.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Thanks.
So
There you
Yeah, so I was just going to conclude on, on our end, learning, fast selecting proper equipment is important. Assembly, training, and implementation of the team has required flexibility on our end. We've been able to manage our costs doing this project in-house, and we've come to learn that quality control can be a timely endeavor. So, and on that note, I'll hand it over to my colleague.
Let me briefly prepare myself here. Why don't I start by answering some questions? We got the idea and we started doing this project because we're entering into a period of panic in the library, and I think we may be going into a period like this earlier than some other places, and other places may escape it, but I'm pretty confident that a lot of library institutions, and particularly law libraries, are going to have this problem in the very near future if you're not getting into them right now. We're getting a new building, and the result of that new building is going to be a net, pretty significant net loss of stack space for the library. And there's a lot of reasons for that, and one of the biggest reasons for that is things coming home to roost. Our provost and our dean talking to us for years saying, why are you spending money on this? Can't you just get it online? Well, now they're building a new building and everybody's competing over space, and we don't have good answers to those questions to a great extent, except to say, well, what about 50 years from now when we're all dead? What are those law students going to be able to rely on if we've cut the cord and we're just relying on Lexis and Westlaw and Hein Online? And when you've got, a lot of very, right now priorities with people wanting good office space and they don't care about 50 years from now. And, it's all a tenuous abstract argument that we feel is extraordinarily important, but other people just don't. And we lose. And that's going to continue to happen. And we're not the only place that it's going to happen to, certainly. To a certain extent, this is becoming a library project that's eating the library, but very purposefully so. We've got to throw away material, and we've got to do it now. But we don't want our volume counts to go down, and we must retain ownership of this material that we've collected over the years. And how do we do that? Well, we can bitch and moan about our loss of stack space, and we're doing that very as much as we can.
Won't be any good.
No. But what else can we do in order to preserve our material, to retain ownership? Well, what we can do is to think, I'm going to use the phrase, I hate it, but I'm going to say it anyway, think outside of the box, to other ways to retain ownership of material. We have to create it ourselves, one way or another. Getting to the cost issue that Mr. Bruce just raised a minute ago, just before your question, here's what it really comes down to. We can invest millions of dollars as an institution in shelf space, because that's really what it costs when you get right down to it. You have to build a building to house the books. And there's been an institutional decision to say no to that. But on the other hand, if we engage in projects like this, we're talking about thousands, maybe tens of thousands of dollars in equipment and disk space, etc. But when you compare it with what the real costs are for not doing this, if you're not just going to give up, the price for doing something like this is actually pretty good. Tens of thousands versus millions, really. Anybody have any questions about that? As far as selection of the actual material we're doing, cost has a great deal to do with that too. This is stuff that's all in the public domain, so we don't have to deal with any copyright issues, and that was the consideration that we started with. We're going to get rid of and digitize as much stuff that we can do without having hassles from anybody. So that was a number one priority. A number two priority that has a very large impact on the practicality of this project is the fact that it is books that have been cataloged and that bibliographic data already exists for. If you read the literature on this subject, you know, people creating digital libraries, one of the biggest costs is development and input of the metadata. The metadata is extraordinarily important, especially when you're talking about something. This is going to be a very large-scale project. And so if you don't have very good quality metadata, it's all going to get lost at some point. And developing that metadata, inputting it, is going to bring the costs up to 20 cents a page very quickly. But in this case, we selected it. There are MARC records all over the place for each one of the documents that we're scanning. So the question is we're using some techniques to take MARC records that already exist and manipulate that data and use that to preserve. So we're cutting out all of those costs by choosing this type of material. So post-processing goals. That's mostly what I want to talk about actually right now is, again, post-processing being the biggest cost, really. Scanning is cheap now because the scanners are cheap and they're fast and they're reliable. But doing all the stuff that would normally have to be done by hand that brings the cost way up. We're thinking about how can we develop techniques to automate as much of that as possible. MARC records exist. They exist in computers that are on the internet. How can we gather that data in an automated fashion? How can we manipulate it for our own purposes to make it useful metadata for a digital library collection in an automated fashion? How can we process these images to make them useful for an archive and useful for publication as well? So our archiving standards. Eric has talked about this a little bit. For the archive, we're using open standard TIFF files, a bit larger than a PDF or some other choices, but you get a nice, richly preserved document. You don't get a lot of loss. We use lossless compression, which is another disagreement with the GPO. They're insisting on no compression at all. We're using FAX4, which is a lossless compression, but does shrink it down somewhat. More images on a disk. Black and white is sufficiently readable for these images with lossless compression. Again, I mentioned this earlier already. These are not Gutenberg Bibles. We need the data. So if we get a nice readable image at 600 dpi black and white, that's really all we feel the need to do as far as preserving the data. Yes?
With these government documents, do you have any kind of bleed-through problem where the image from the back of the page bleeds up?
You can compensate for that to a great extent by fiddling around with the contrast and the brightness of the image. But there is some bleed-through, and I'll show you some toward the end of the presentation.
Black and white, is it white tone, John?
Yes, white tone.
Okay.
So, one of the issues that I personally was very concerned with is I was thinking about this project, that it's going to be a very large-scale project. We're going to have thousands and thousands and thousands of images once we're done here. We've already got, look, how many?
Over 9,000.
Yeah. I mean, I did a processing run, and it stopped at about 6,000 just the other day, just for one batch of stuff. Just one page per image, and we're talking about between 200 and 400 pages per document. The solution I suggest, and that we're going with, is to keep the metadata with the object. And there are pretty interesting ways to do it. One suggested to me by Mr. Bruce last summer. That I don't know if you just tossed that out to me. Do you remember talking to me about this?
I absolutely do not, John. You take credit for it.
He said some people were talking about, there are ways to stick ASCII data into images. I started looking into that, and indeed there are very interesting ways to stick ASCII data into images. TIFFs are actually very good for that. It is tagged image file format. It's a binary format, but there are binary tags in there, and there are lots and lots of utilities out there that can read these fields and write to them. Particularly ImageMagick, which is what we're using. It's a very powerful freeware set of utilities that run on Linux, and it will embed ASCII data, so plain text data, into a comment field within TIFF images. It's wonderful. It's right there. It's very usable, and you can stick whatever you want in there. The limit to what you can stick in there, I think, there's probably some theoretical limit, but we're not getting anywhere near it. So you can stick a whole record in each image. Again, just to talk about this a little bit, JPEG, PDF, and TIFF all have these fields available for use. They include a general comment field, which every one of these formats have. There are also specialized fields that are used. One of the most notable is Adobe's XMP format that uses a special ASCII field within these images that it writes XMP data to. We looked into using that. W3C has also been playing around a little bit with it for photographs, and they're actually using the standard comment field to stick stuff in. We actually wanted to standardize this as much as possible, so we looked into using one or the other of these data or metadata formats. However, they're all limited mostly to technical data and with just very limited informational data. I wouldn't even call it bibliographic data, like name of image, who did it and when, and that's about it. But it set us along what I thought was a good course to pursue for this. We decided to use the general comment field because it didn't need this kind of specialized software that would be required to write to our own special field or to read from our own special field. Lots and lots of tools can access this, so it's easy to find. And I'd like to show you a very quick example of this. I think it looks neat. Here I've got some of the output of our processing scripts. And one of them here you can see is a TIFF file. And the way we're standardizing on this to make things doable, the first part of the file name is the LCCN number. And that's what we're using to locate bibliographic records within the Library of Congress website, the catalog, their online catalog. And then the extension is just a sequence number. So it's not actually page 148 there, but it is the 148 page in the document. There's the small Romans at the beginning, which mess up the sequence. But just to show you what I'm talking about. So I'm bringing this TIFF image up in a text editor. And so, of course, naturally enough, what we're seeing is binary garbage. But when you go to the bottom of the document where the ASCII field is located, all of a sudden you get something that's something close to readable here. And this is, in fact, the embedded metadata that we've stuck into this image. We're doing it with Dublin core tags in RDF format. And I'm going to talk about that more in just a second. But you can see there's technical data about the image, the compression, that it is in fact a TIFF, the size in bytes, and the size, the image size, and the image density, 600 by 600, that's there. Cut off a little bit, but it's there. And then as we scroll up through here, you'll start seeing stuff that looks an awful lot like I ripped it right out of a MARC record, which is exactly what I did. You see here, of course, we're cut off a little bit here. I don't know if that's readable. But Library of Congress subject headings, all taken out of the 650 fields of the MARC record that we had harvested. and we're sticking it right in there. Higher up, you see the LCCN number. I have a loop which is going too many times, which has listed ourselves as a contributor more than once. But then, you know, Dublin Core Creator, Dublin Core Publisher, Dublin Core Source. We're sticking the SUDOC number in there. And of course, when we get to the top of it, you can see we're using, I don't know how many of you are conversant in RDF, but we're using namespaces for DCQ, Qualified Dublin Core, DC Terms, and Dublin Core. So that's how it's looking. What I like about this is, again, thinking 50 years down the line. We could do this in a MySQL database and Postgres and something else and put it all in somewhere where it's a nice repository for the information. But what happens, again, 50 years down the line when the connection between the database and all of these hundreds of thousands of images gets broken? At this point, we've got a collection that can reconstruct itself. It includes exactly, each image includes all of the information about the document itself, and then at the bottom, of course, you'll see a page value here, that this one is page 148 of 458, exactly where it fits in the collection. You could have a machine put the entire collection back together for you.
That answers my question.
Which is what I was really concerned with. And just for fun, if you see at the bottom, you'll see a little bit more binary. And then in other fields, these are not part of the comments field, that ImageMagick did the manipulating for us, and that it was done on our Sonic scanner. So that's that. So we're using metadata that already exists and is available in MARC. There's no need to create it. We convert them to qualified Dublin Core and RDF XML format. One issue that we had in developing this is that MARC is imperfectly crosswalked to qualified Dublin Core. Qualified Dublin Core is imperfectly implemented in RDF. These are things that are still being worked out. And so what you saw of that metadata record that I showed you is something like that. But it is using recognized RDF tags. So they're not something that we're making up. And almost all of the C data fields, the actual data that's not in the tags themselves, the stuff between the start and end tags, is fairly elemental. If you look at them, the only stuff that's really not elemental that I worried about, but I couldn't find a better way to go around it with it, is stuff like this, page 148 of 458. There should be a way to just have a number and have the tags define what the values are going to be instead of having to have what's really an explanatory phrase here. Similarly with, again, this is being cut off, but like compression type equals group 4. That's close to elemental, but not quite there. However, when you start getting to the top of the metadata record, it does in fact get much better. Like the Library of Congress subject headings, when we get down to the list elements here, each one of these list elements is just the subject heading and nothing else. So that's an elemental value, very machine readable, and it's an optimal thing for metadata coding. So we're close. Format constraints. 200-page, multi-page TIFFs or PDFs are totally impractical for archives or production use. Viewers will all crash. And even producing them tends to make lots of nice crashes. The GPO, if in fact we do end up cooperating with them later on, which we would very much like to do, they are going to be insisting on individual TIFFs, one per page. So we're standardizing on that. We do want fast transport over the internet because along with the fears that we have, there's also great opportunity here. We've got all of these GovDocs sitting on shelves that people go up and see every now and again. For self-preservation purposes, we're digitizing it, but now that we have it digitized, what can we do? we can put it on the internet and show it to everybody in the world. Why not? So, in fact, that's what we're doing. And so what we're doing, well, so what we're actually doing, getting ahead of myself here, but it's just a PowerPoint presentation. We're squashing down, we're keeping an archival TIFF, and we're also, at the same time, generating a very squashed down image PDF, which, you know, again, people can read very easily over the internet and will also transport pretty fast. Again, we fiddled around with doing things in like 10-page chunks, but that messes up searching and is not really a good way to organize things. What we're doing in order to make this solution work with the single image files is we're OCRing and appending all of the individual OCR files that are in text format into one very large text file with page break markers in them. And that's what's actually being indexed by our search engine, and that's actually what's being searched by people. And then we're substituting the image when people go to look for it. I originally tried to do this in XML with the nice RDF record, you know, just completely unaltered as a nice header for metadata, and then we could have, you know, a very simple XML format with an XML tag for the page breaks. That is what I would like to do in the future. What I found, however, is that when we're indexing the material with Swishy, the search engine that we're using, that uses Linux's libtiff libraries, and the OmniPage Pro program that we're right now using for OCR is leaving a little too many UTF-8 characters in there, which may mean nothing to most people. But what it does mean is that for no good reason, the search engine keeps barking when it tries to index this stuff, and it won't do it. The easy solution was to go with something more forgiving, and we're just, right now, we're formatting it all as a large fake HTML file. And so we're taking that RDF record that I just showed you, reformatting it as HTML meta tags, which are still quite useful for all the basic data, and that's what's going out and being indexed. Okay, and again, like I said, the search engine won't play well in XML with our inexpensive OCR engine. So, just as a quick example, so you can see what we're talking about here. This is the format for the MARC records that we're taking. And again, this is cut and paste right from loc.gov catalog. And then with a nice Perl script, once we have a whole series of text files, we just append them all together and stick what you see on the top here on the top. And again, this is meta equals DC subject scheme, and quite understandable. Our Swishy search engine can understand and read these and make them into specialized search fields for our search engine. So you can search our search engine by Library of Congress subject heading, title, author, year of publication, as well as free text all at the same time. So we're using Swishy. It's a nice program. It is freeware, which we like even more about it. It uses a very hackable Perl script for its CGI interface to present results. By default, one of the nicest things about it, which made our interface possible, is that it gives a keyword in context result along with the file name of the file that was indexed. And it's fairly simple Perl, so it's just the quick result is in a nice little variable, and you can make that variable bigger or smaller. And the solution we came up with is to expand that quick result and make it nice and huge, so it's guaranteed to grab the page number marks. And then we just parse that quick result and grab the page number out. And we already have a Library of Congress control number, which is, as you saw before, the basis of our file naming scheme. That is then just put into a string with the Library of Congress control number and the page number, And the result is that when you search our collection, what you actually get is the page that's got the keyword that you searched for. So for example, I just submitted a search just on the word immigration, which I know we do have some documents available on it now. And here's the result. There's the keyword in context result, which after I expanded it and grabbed the page number out, then I shrank it down again for something reasonable for reading. And if you look where the actual hypertext links are, is that showing up down here? Yes. This word immigration that's highlighted appeared on page 2. Just before the beginning of this quick result, there was a page break code there that had been embedded at the time of production that had page 2 in there. And you can see the hypertext link points to hearing.cgi file equals, that's the LCCN number that identifies the document, page number 2. What that CGI script is going to do is bring us up a nice web page with a nav bar on the one side and bring up page 2 of the document in the PDF image format. Why do we do this? The OCR we don't have to correct as long as we don't show it to anybody. Current OCR engines are quite accurate. They're about 99% accurate for getting the words correct, but the formatting is still absolutely horrible. The result is that they're not really readable, although the search engines can deal with them very well. So, I mean, it's the basic JSTOR solution is to show people the image, but search the text. And somebody had asked me before about bleed-through. So here's the Verso page. It's the Committee on the Judiciary. All the names are here. It's quite a readable document, really, especially if we blow it up a little bit. So, I mean, even Peter Rodino, who's on the other side of the page, there was somebody who went back and forth with a marker for some reason. You can still read it quite nicely. All the information is right there. And again, it says we're on page 2 of 80, which is being cut off, but it's there. There's little nav buttons to go back and forth. You can jump to a page. And also, you can't quite see, it's cut off on the end there, but just for convenience purposes, at the time of production, we also compile 1 or 2 very large PDF files, which have all the pages. I cut it off at about 120 pages per PDF. And if you want to download the whole thing in a big chunk, say for printing out, you can do that by clicking on the link that's over here, but cut off. Okay, freeware does it all. Good time to jump to this anyway. Creation of the archival tips. A small display PDF, a large downloadable tip, and the metadata manipulation. We've been able to automate all of these processes, all done with open source freeware. It's all just actually available in a standard distribution of Linux. We're using TIFF to PDF, TIFF to PS, and then to PDF to squash down the PDFs nice and small, make them very transportable. They're a little bit clunky, but they're very fast and effective tools that do a very good job. Image Magic is wonderful. If you saw in that RDF record that was embedded in the TIFF, there was all that technical data, you know, the image density, the compression, all of that information is lifted out of the TIFF images automatically using Image Magic and then stuck back in as an RDF record to make it more readable for machines. ImageMagick does the insertion of the metadata records into the TIFFs as well. It does take some significant processing power, but it can run overnight and just clunk along whenever it needs to, because it is in fact all automated. I've written a lot of other scripts as well on top of that to do a lot of error checking, comparing the number of files to make sure that our output equals the same number of input files to begin with, that things are not getting lost in the source somewhere. We do a lot of that because things can get lost very easily. The one thing that we do have problems with, even right now, is our OCR package. Right now we're using OmniPage Pro from ScanSoft, which again does a great job. It's very accurate, but it is a Windows-only program, and it is not robust. I think they want $400 or so for it retail. You can get it significantly cheaper if you say you've already got an OCR package with your scanner, which is fine. But it does insert the UTF-8 encoded characters, which makes XML parsers give up. And it also does not handle large volumes of documents very well. It very often just stops. It's not even frozen, it's just not working. And it's just no good for our purposes, really. I mean, I've been clunking along with doing 10-page chunks at a time, but when we're talking about doing processing of maybe 6,000 images at a time, it's just not good enough. It does have a very nice-looking batch utility where you can just say, I want to do this whole directory, go. But again, it's just not going to finish the job. What we're doing right now is we're talking to the people at Bibidata. That uses the same ScanSoft OCR engine, which is, again, nice and accurate and good, but it is a command line interface and runs on Linux. So it's a much more robust platform to be on, and it's something that can also be integrated into our general processing scripts. So we can do the OCR, the TIFF creation, the PDF creation, the insertion and manipulation of the metadata, all through a Perl script. No human intervention at all, which is what we need, because it's basically Eric and I and volunteers from our staff to do the quality control and the scanning. If the machines can't do it, it's really not something we can do. But the machines can do it, and they are doing it, and it's working out pretty well. The OCR shop from Bibidata is one thing we're going to have to put out some money for software that we're willing to do. It retails for about $1,200. They are willing to negotiate with academic institutions for nice discounts. They didn't tell me not to tell anybody that they're offering it to us for $800. But it's an individual kind of thing they tell me. That's for their light version, which will only put out text format. They have a much more expensive version, which will put out nice PDFs and all kinds of things. But again, for our purposes, for the way I showed you we're processing it, we want text, and so the light version is just fine. Economics. We chose a collection that we don't want to lose, but we can't keep. The metadata already exists for all this stuff. The tools to automate all of the costliest steps in the production process are all out there, and with a little creativity can be utilized. Scanning technology has really come into its own in the last 2 years. I went to the AIM convention, and I can't remember what AIM stands for, but it's for corporate enterprise content management types. So all the best scanners were all there, mostly banking machines. But all of a sudden now there is a mid-range high-performance scanner on the market. Bell & Howell also makes a very nice one. IBM makes a nice one. We settled on the Panasonics. We have not been able to break it. It does get dirty quite often, but that's because we've got documents from the 1970s that are full of dust. And so, funnily enough, the machine gets full of dust quite often, but that's not a big deal. The scanning in OCR is fast, accurate, and cheap. So it's something that we can very well do. We are reorienting how we think of ourselves as librarians. And we're doing it out of a sense of self-preservation. I personally do not wish to be a person who mostly handles passwords and, deals with proxy servers so you can get IP access to online vendors. I want and need our library to retain ownership of material. That's the only way we're going to be relevant. That's the only way we're going to preserve information for future generations. And we're finding that this seems to be working out for us. So, I already talked about ownership versus access. And I think at that point, I'll end it. Yes?
How much was the scanner?
The scanner, it lists for $1,200. They sold it to us at an educational discount for $999. Is Tom Ryan here? I think we use CDW, but I'm not sure. But it's around. The discounts are available. It's kind of interesting too because Panasonic, that we deal with most, they have the 2026 model, which is about $1,000. You can get it a little bit cheaper. The next higher duty model that looks exactly the same, but it's got a bigger motor in it, costs $3,000. So if we do anything to expand this project, we're probably just going to buy 2 more of these 2026s.
I'm using Canon, and Canon comes with Capture Perfect,
Mm-hmm.
and it capturing medium into TIFF and PDF. And PDF, I can set it out for image PDF or OCR PDF.
Mm-hmm.
So
Well, I mean, all of these machines, you can use a number of. You can use a number of different interface softwares. We're using the capture package that came along with the scanner. We like it really mostly because you can do a lot of presets with it, including file naming presets, which we find really good. But we want to save it in TIFF format with individual pages. So a lot of the manipulation that can be done by a lot of programs at that level, we don't need to do. And in fact, again, at that point, if you were doing large volumes, you might find problems down the line because these Windows GUI programs will tend to have problems, I think, when doing large volumes. Because you can use OmniPage in just the manner you're describing, too. Send it right into OCR, which we actually do for smaller projects, and it works very nicely. But when we started doing this, we ran into big problems.
So you decided to work with government documents first, and that's a huge collection, but are they in order by SUDOC number, so you went over and said we're going to start with shelf 1? I mean, it looks like you chose the most important things first, because that was a judicial hearing, so, it looks like you decided, okay, we have this chunk of government documents, this is most useful to our users, so we're going to start here, or this is the largest collection, so we're going to start here, or something like that.
We decided on the congressional hearings because
Nobody else is doing it, yeah.
Nobody else is doing it, and it's a very large chunk of material that's taking up space in our shelves.
I'm glad to hear somebody's doing it, since at least 2 companies are doing the serial steps. It's nice to know that the hearings have started separately. That's great.
Yeah. Sure.
Yeah, big news this last year in the library community is the Google Print project, digitizing books, indexing them to Google. Have you thought at all about contacting them and working with them?
Quite frankly, no. My impression is that they're not going to be doing something like government documents, and that they're going to be doing really old material. And anything that's not particularly old, they're pretty much going to be just putting up things like table of contents and little snapshots so you can buy the thing. So I'm not sure I'm actually got my doubts as to how useful Google Print's going to be in the long run. It'd be great for really old stuff.
Yeah.
In fact, it will be fantastic for really old stuff. But it's probably not going to cover the kinds of things that we're preserving here.
The other question I had is, what about microphones? Do you have any version of that?
We're starting to. It's at a very experimental stage. In fact, we bought a very expensive machine with some extra cash. I don't know how I convinced my boss to do it. But we bought a high-volume fiche scanner, the Mecco 565. It's an amazing machine. You can put a stack of fiche in there and it picks them up one by one. And I don't know how it does it so fast. It automatically zones all the images on the sheet and just goes boom, 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 boom. It's an amazing thing. But we're doing really high volume. In fact, we're doing the New Jersey statutes at large.
Yeah.
We started from the earliest colonial material that we have on microform. And just in the course of a month of me just playing around with it to get used to the machine, I got up through the end of the Civil War. Metadata issues, organizational issues, I have a lot of work to do before that hits the internet, but it will. And we're going to do a lot of that kind of stuff because we've got a lot of fiche that's basically government documents. And we're going to get rid of that all and digitize it. Steve?
Long Microfilm Consortium is supposedly going to be doing all of their material. I don't know if they're doing it in order to put it up as a database or if they're going to do it to make it available to people. But,
They're charging.
they're charging for it, okay. Then the other thing is that the University of Michigan, at least, is doing their government documents collection for Google. So they, I believe that Stanford is also going to be doing part of its documents collection for Google. So you might want to talk to those people to coordinate.
Yeah, thank you.
You know, again, that should cut down some of your costs. When you're talking about your fiche machine, is that doing a digital copy or is that doing a paper copy of the fiche?
No, it's generating tips.
Generating tips, okay.
Yeah.
Great.
One of the things that we've been thinking about quite a lot too is we've started, again as an experiment, scanning a few volumes of the Rutgers Law Review. And one of the things that we're thinking really hard about and would like to try and generate some interest in is been thinking about one of the things that takes up so much space in our library, which costs a lot of money for that shelf space. We pay for the subscriptions for the law review. We pay the law review people to make a loss to generate the law reviews. What I would like to do in the long run too, as part of this kind of project, is scan all of our law reviews that we have. That's one thing we'd like to work on. Of course, the problem is that there are copyright issues with that. Take this home, please, and think about it yourselves. We are going to scan the Rutgers Law Review from the Rutgers Law Journal, not the Law Review, that's the newer one. But we're going to scan the Rutgers Law Journal from Volume 1 on. It will be with very nice metadata, very similar to what you've seen. I've got the metadata standard through the format all done. It'll be in high quality TIFFs. We'll do it in PDFs as well. We'll burn it onto nice DVDs for you. And we will give it to anybody who is willing to give us a copy of theirs. In fact, my dean has told me that he would be willing to allow us to help out with scanning. I shouldn't be saying this because we wanted to hold back a little, but I'm saying it anyway. That we'll scan at cost for anybody who wants to participate, but who doesn't have the facilities to do it themselves.
Webcast now.
And we'd like to share. Well, you know, they did give me tenure last year, so. You know, if you can't abuse it, what good is it?
There's two things that people might want to think about. Alexis, I was involved for 2.5 years, as Tom does, with a project to look at all of the American legal cases and all the case law. Lexis and Westlaw do not include everything. Some of those materials are available and could be scanned. Law schools could build their own set of cases that would be complete, rather than incomplete and not have to pay for it like the way you do now. So that's another project you might want to think about. And in 1993, I suggested that all law schools scan their own material, go back and find all of it. I applaud the fact that you find it in Lindley. Thank you.
Thank you. One more thing I would just like to also offer that my dean has authorized me to offer is that if anybody is interested in doing these kinds of projects, again, development costs initially to write all these Perl scripts as being kind of high, and Rutgers has been very nice to let me do it. I'm releasing it under the GNU public license. If anybody wants to do this kind of thing, you can cut out your own production costs and use whatever I've got. My email address is on the CALI website for this. I've got cards here. So if anybody wanted to think about this, all the software is available.